Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, it's part 2 of a chat with myself. Sounds kind of strange, but that's how we're rolling. It's the second part of the 2 solo episodes I did last week. Part 1 was all about my absolute capitulation and rock bottom. And part 2 today is slightly lighter. I talk through how I got myself out of the hole and how I created my Life by Design, which has then led me on to here and where we are today with all things Life by Design. As I said last week, my real hope with sharing this story is one, that you get a better understanding of who I am and I guess who's behind the podcast, but 2, and more importantly, I hope that when I share this, that someone who might be in a struggle of sorts can use this as a piece to lean on and to give them a level of hope and optimism that there is a way out. Because I know that was really big for me and really beneficial. So enjoy part 2 and hope you get something from it. Now, guys, before we start this week's episode of the podcast, I want to talk to you about the Life by Design Mastermind. The Life by Design Mastermind is the mastermind for go-getters and high achievers who are looking to create a more successful, fulfilling, and balanced life by design. If you're serious about transforming your life, achieving your goals, and living a life on your terms, then the Life by Design is your golden ticket. Head over to the show notes and click on the link for more details about the program. Gang, welcome back. Part 2 for those tuning in. If you haven't heard part 1 of this conversation, I highly recommend going back and listening to that before picking up this piece. As a little recap, real quick recap. Part 1 of this, so last week's podcast, was very much around the total capitulation of my life over a 15-month period. And part 2 is a much nicer story as I find my way out. I think when I finished part 1, I was in Adelaide and had bottomed out, ended up in hospital, living with my mum, but was starting to slowly turn things around in that my brother very kindly had given me some work at his gym. And I'd finally reached rock bottom in terms of being in hospital. And I remember being in hospital and thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to wave the white flag. I've given up. Like, what else can I do? What else can the universe take from me? And the way that I would reframe it or rephrase it some 5 years on now, is more surrendering to the universe and what it had to offer me. And prior to this, I've been pushing to make things happen. Part because that's the nature of me. I kind of feel that that is a part of my personality to kind of push and make things happen. Part of it was out of shame and embarrassment for not knowing where I was going. Part of it was scarcity of like, I need to make things happen. And I think in hindsight, part of it was also because of my previous partner. Like I wanted to make things happen for her as well as myself. So I'd pushed and tried things and applied for jobs and got fired, etc. And when I ended up in hospital, I was like, fuck it. Like I got nothing left to give. In hindsight, I wish I'd surrendered earlier, but how good is hindsight? So anyway, I'm on the hospital bed and that's like my final rock bottom. The one thing that I could always count on my whole life was my fitness and sport and everything else. And that had finally been taken away from me. So when I say I had nothing left to lose, other than my life, I kind of felt like I had nothing left to lose. Obviously started with my job, money, car, in there as well, actually. I forgot to mention this. My computer had got stolen as well. My card got broken into and the computer had been stolen. So other than literally me dying, I wasn't sure what else I could personally lose. I think I had a bag to my name as well. So maybe my wallet could get stolen and my phone. But really, like, I had nothing left to lose. And the fact that I had started working for Sam, my brother, prior to me ending up in hospital, felt like I was slowly starting to turn things around. Like at least I was making some kind of money. I had a roof over my head. I was living with my mum. My mum and I have a amicable relationship. I wouldn't say it's strong. It's definitely not volatile in the way that it used to be. But having us both under the same roof wasn't a good thing for me. And in hindsight, wasn't a good thing for her. To the point where I would sit in my car at night out the front of our house, having dinner in the car, waiting for her to go to sleep. And I can't remember. I think my sister might have done the same thing, but I just didn't enjoy that home environment. Again, as I've said throughout the course of the first episode, everyone's doing their best. And I sincerely mean that. But the way that she interacted with me, again, everyone's doing their best. The way that she interacted with me made things so much worse. So I left first thing in the morning as soon as I could, because I obviously was going to my brother's gym to work, and I would come home last thing at night. I'd literally just sleep there. It really is a skill, having been on the receiving end now and obviously spending so much time in the coaching space. It really is a skill to have someone feel seen, heard, and understood properly. And I wouldn't say you either have the skill or you don't. You're probably somewhere along quite a big range. And I've experienced the absolute depths of one's ability to have you feel seen, heard, and understood, like really. And I know the names off the top of my head, that the 3 to 4 people that are elite at this skill. Then there's some that are good, and then there's some that could do with a lot of work. So I have no doubt that the intention was good, but I felt worse again for it. So it got to the point where me driving 30 minutes to my brother's gym in the morning, and the fact that I hated being in that house despite the luxury of having a roof over my head, meant that I moved to my brother's, who was, I think, 5 to 10 minutes. It's probably about 5 minutes away from the gym. He had a spare room. It wasn't really set up, but he had a spare room. So I would have a mattress on the ground in the spare room. And for me, the fact that I could go home to his house and not feel the pressure and the friction and everything that I felt at our family home was like a massive win. And I can't remember, he'll probably laugh at this if he ever hears it. I can't remember if he had aircon or not, and like heater. But I remember in the winter it being fucking freezing. This is Adelaide, so it doesn't compare to like Melbourne or Sydney. Sorry, Melbourne or like Tassie. But the fact that I don't think there was heating, or if it was, it might have been in his room or something like that. Anyway, I remember going to bed at night in a beanie and a hoodie. And then as I got warm throughout the course of the night, I would take it off. So I'm lying on a mattress on the ground, going to bed with a beanie and a hoodie on, hoping to kind of heat up throughout the course of the night to take it off. But I don't know if anyone's been in this position, to feel safe and to not feel judged and to be in a house that there doesn't feel pressure. I would have slept on the carpet. And as someone who would say that his upbringing from a home environment was, or resembled and felt like it resembled, a war zone, I would 1,000 times over go into another house that was loving, safe, nurturing, and non-judgmental, and sleep on the floor every day of the week. Like, to have luxuries, a bed in a house where you don't feel safe, I would happily trade in luxuries to sleep on the floor in a house that is safe, non-judgmental, not violent, not a war zone, etc. So as an outsider, it might look grim sleeping on the mattress of your younger brother's spare room. But at least there, I could rest at night going, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. But at least I can just sleep in peace tonight and not worry about anything else outside the world. And I remember one of the things that really helped me get through was knowing my values. And I honestly think, and I don't want this to sound too dark, but truth is, I honestly think the fact that I'd studied NLP and I knew my values were two of the things that kept me alive. And Sorry, I'm just applying a little bit of moisturizer to my lips. I think knowing the values and knowing what I needed to do each day just to, like, in my eyes, win the day, helped me get through the day when I didn't know where I was going. And anytime my mind would wander to the future, I would have this paralyzing anxiety that I would do what I could to bring me back into the now. I used to think the future is bleak was a metaphor until I saw it. And what I mean by that is I remember going and hanging out in this park. It's called Kensington Park in Rose, Adelaide, to get my vitamin D, which I love, getting a bit of sun. And, you know, as I'm laying there in the sun, I would have my mind unintentionally and unconsciously wander to the future. And it's so hard to describe, but it was so, like, pixelated and grainy, and I could not see anything of my future, that I'd get like this wild anxiety and bring me back into the now. So what I found myself doing, and I mentioned this at the start of the first podcast, is I would live in the day, and that's not always easy for me, but I would live in the day and I would get my health. So I'd get fitness, nutrition, sleep, nature, personal development, and some kind of connection. I was like, okay, if I can tick those 6 boxes, I've won the day. No idea where I'm going, nothing else, but if I can tick those 6. Now, for some people, ticking 6 boxes might sound like a lot. I've always felt, that's what I'm looking for, privileged. That is not the word I'm looking for, but I'm going to roll with it. Privileged in the motivation that I have. So even when I'm at my flattest, I still found motivation to do those 6 things. For some people, they might just find enough energy to make their bed, and that's cool as well. So I've hit rock bottom. I've ended up in hospital. I've now decided that I'm moving out of mum's home closer to the gym, which saves me time, and I feel kind of safer, happier, etc. in that house. And at this time, I'm juggling 4, maybe 5 jobs. So I had dish pig at Sam's Cafe. I had taking classes. I had rebranding Sam's gym. I had waitering at his weddings. And then at one point I had a 5th job, which was being a garbo at a festival. If you're ever looking for a little bit of humble pie, being a garbo at festivals is the height of humble pie. I'll talk about that in a sec. There's a part of that that felt really satisfying and liberating. Liberating in that I felt like I had nothing to lose. Like, how can I go backwards from being in hospital with nothing? And also fulfilling in that it brought Sam and I closer together. Like, I was, hopefully he sees this the same way, but I was helping him. I was helping him build his business. I don't know if I was always doing the best job. Like, I'm not the fastest person when it comes to catering, etc. But I felt like I was contributing to him. If I'm going to contribute to someone, even if it's not my ideal outcome, it's cool that I could contribute to my brother and hopefully help him in some way. To the point where I said to him a couple of times, "What are you paying your dish pigs?" And I can't remember the price. I was like, "I'll take $5 less an hour." So he was winning and I was winning because I just wanted more work. So at one point I've got the 5 jobs and I'm starting to see, like, lights. I'm starting to see my way out. And interestingly, prior to all of this, 1 week after the hospitalization and then the ayahuasca ceremony that I had the idea of momentum. It wasn't called momentum, obviously, at that time, but I had the idea of a men's business. And Janoah and I had been in the same kind of circles for a long time. We didn't always see eye to eye. We got along, but we would never, he wasn't the type of person that I would call up for a beer or whatever. We were just in the same circles. He was partying hard. We joke about this all the time. He was partying hard and I was judging those that partied hard. And he had kind of gone through a bit of a transition himself. He'd gone and done meditation. I think he'd spent 6 months sober. Like he was really on a different path. At the time, I think he was in Sri Lanka. And him and I had obviously started to kind of bond over personal development and bettering ourselves and things like that. And I messaged him. I can't remember if I messaged him or voice messaged him, but I was like, dude, I've got this idea. I'd love for you to be in on it. And there was a couple of reasons that I thought about this. The first one was the thought of starting business again on my own was too much to handle. I'd been through bankruptcy. I'd obviously been hit with like a breakdown in my confidence, and just the thought of rebuilding was too much at a time where I was really flat, and like small things required a lot of effort. So I thought he's the best bet. So I got in touch with him. I think he was literally drinking pina coladas when I spoke to him. He's like, yeah, sweet, mate. Good chat. He obviously didn't think I was serious. I can't remember how long it was, but essentially I came back to him. I was like, nah, I'm serious. Let's do it. So he jumped on board. And then we had a third business partner at the time, a guy called Dylan, who I had only met once or twice, I think. And in hindsight, that is not the way to enter a business partnership, not knowing someone other than to kind of meet. But he was also big on personal development, really good talker, really savvy in terms of knowing his stuff in the work. So I got in touch with him as well. And we kind of just joined forces. I think it was 6 weeks later that we held our first event in Sydney. Fuck knows how we moved that quick, but we found a way. We sold out our Sydney event and momentum was formed. Now that momentum's kind of come and gone, and I haven't really spoken to Janoah about this in detail, but it was another piece of the pie that in a very roundabout way saved my life. Like to have those boys to lean on and to banter and everything else, and then to bring in the guys that we did was unbelievable. And I really do think there's a potentially an unhealthy, selfish level in that it helped me. But I'm hoping everyone who's crossed paths with momentum over the 4 years that we had it's been able to help them as well. It helped me a lot. And again, I think one of those other moments of like, would I still be here if it wasn't for that? I could not comfortably answer that question. So we held our first event. Then we went to Melbourne a couple of months later, held our second event. And with the jobs that I was doing for Sam, I was like starting to find it out. And in March 2020, Janoah had also decided that his time in Sydney was up and he was coming to Adelaide. He was going to pick me up and we were going to move to Melbourne for 6 months, where our third business partner, Dylan, was. So he's come to Adelaide, literally, I think with the intent to stay a week. I could be wrong, but something around that. And we're in Adelaide and it's March 2020. Comes to Adelaide and we hear this thing. I'm not going to kind of go into this in too much detail because I don't want to start a war. But I'd caught wind of the potential of this virus happening 6 months before. So for those that are wondering where I could be coming with this little conspiracy theory about COVID, that's where it came from. The fact that I had been told about it 6 months before. Anyway, we don't need to go down that path. So Janoah had come to Adelaide to pick me up and essentially go to Melbourne. And then COVID hit. And we were like, let's just kind of sit tight and watch this unfold. And we were spending a lot of time together. The most random of things had happened. I'd started seeing a chick, very loosely, but I'd started seeing a chick whose parents lived about 40 minutes south of where I was staying at my brother's. And somehow the universe, where Janoah was going to stay with his dad, was across the road. Like of all the places in Adelaide, he was staying across the road. So I was spending time with her at this house and he was across the road, and the kind of three of us built a little friendship. Not sure that's the right word, but you get what I mean. Anyway, we're sitting there. March goes by, April goes by, May goes by, and we're like, fuck, Melbourne's not going to happen. And her and I were very I wouldn't even call it a relationship, I don't think. But her and I were seeing each other like sporadically for 3 months. And she's like, she had by this stage left her family house and gone back up to a place called Kingscliff, which is 30 minutes north of Byron Bay. And she's like, well, why don't you guys move up here? Because her and Janoah had become quite close. And I can't remember what I was feeling at the time. I wouldn't have been really attuned. But I was like, but Janoah and I were like, fuck, we're not staying in Adelaide. Why not? And I think like the plans that you come up with in your head, but I think initially, before we had entered this idea, was like, I'll go up, I'll live near her with her, and I'll travel back and forth between Melbourne and Kingscliff because that's where our third business partner was going to be. And like just unreasonable. Anyway, we moved up and we actually left on Janoah's birthday. His 34th birthday, left the morning of and drove up, stayed in Sydney for a night and then up to Kingscliff. And either on the way up or maybe a day or two before, she's got a 2-story house. We were originally going to move into upstairs, but that fell through. So I think we might have even been driving. She's like, guys, I can't have you stay here. I won't go into kind of the reasons why, but couldn't have us stay there. So we're like, fuck, we've taken this gamble thinking that we had somewhere to move into. And she said, sorry, guys, it's not going to happen. So we ended up booking a 2-week stay at, I think it's called the Mantra Hotel up there in Kingscliff. And then within 2 weeks, her and I parted ways. It was always shaky, which makes the fact that I would move interstate for a very shaky relationship even funnier. So and for whatever reason, Byron had always been my favorite place, but it hadn't clicked like move to Byron. But we were now 40 minutes away from Byron. Like, fuck, Byron it is. At this stage, July 2020, every man and his dog from Australia had also decided Byron Bay was a really good place to live. So Janoah and I were like, well, fuck, where are we going? We didn't know exactly where we're going, but it ended up being that we moved into a caravan park for 2 months. This little cabin with 2 little bedrooms and a tiny kind of kitchenette. It's called the Discovery Car Park for those that know Byron. And I haven't given it enough time to work out what it was about that. But those 2 months were 2 of the greatest months of my life. We were in my favorite spot, one of Janoah's favorite spot. We were kind of establishing ourselves individually with our coaching business and obviously trying to build momentum and literally just no responsibilities and having the time of our life. I remember, I think we had $50 to our name. Both of us still had no real money. And you'd have to get the numbers off Janoah because he bought them. But essentially we bought 2 bikes. One was a kid's bike and that was so fucking small. So that was for Janoah. And my bike, like the chain didn't work. So every second like pedal that I pressed, it would like click out. So we were just like, it felt like we were laughing for 2 months straight. But finally I felt like I was starting to get traction. I was in Byron, wasn't exactly making a huge amount of money, but was starting to get traction in my coaching business with one of my best mates. And that was starting to develop, both kind of single at the time and just having fun out in Byron and just like living our best life. And I remember saying to Janoah time and time again, like, fuck, dude, how good is this? To the point where he was like, dude, I know, chill. And I just couldn't get over it. I was living my best life. But 2, I also found myself in this like dance of almost anxiety of like, is this too good to be true? And I found myself at times wanting to put a lid on how good things were, because if it was taken away from me, it would break my heart even more. And also like, hey, just lean into it. Just lean into it. So from there, moving to Byron, starting to build a coaching business, then 6 months later meeting 6 months. 6 months later, meeting Shani. We were really good friends for 6 months before we started dating. Everything just kind of fell in place. And I mean everything. Money, career, purpose, friendships, relationship, health. Like I talk about the 6 Ps a lot: profit, purpose, people, partner, performance, and passions. And at rock bottom, I felt like all of those were missing, to the point where the one that I could count on, performance, being my health and fitness, was taken. And I look at things over the last 3 years, but it all kind of happened over the first 15 months, and it's almost like stabilized in the last kind of 15 to 18 months. All of them just found a new place. Purpose, so fortunate to find my second purpose, in terms of the coaching. I'm mindful that a lot of people never find something that feels really purposeful and meaning to them. So for me to find two of them in terms of the health and fitness and analytics, profits, in the best position I've ever been financially in terms of income earned over the last few years, and more so for me, a lifestyle and flexibility that has allowed that. So what is it? 2 years ago, going to Thailand for 6 weeks with Shani and working from there. Last year, going to Europe for 5 weeks and working from there. And this year, going to Bali in a few weeks' time and working from there. And yes, I earned good money in Sydney, but my overheads were ridiculous. And at times I felt trapped. So to be able to live this laptop lifestyle that gives me a freedom and flexibility that I think I've always wanted, but didn't really realize I wanted, doing what I want with the people that I want and doing it how I want, is as liberating for me as anything. And the fact that I look at all of those key areas, and from all of them feeling empty to all of them feeling full. And there'll be different reiterations of that. When Shani and I go into parenthood, there'll be people that come and go. Like, there'll be people that come and go. There'll be ups and downs of business. There'll be ups and downs of our relationship, no doubt. Like, all of those things play a role. But overall, every area is filled. And my hope with you, the listener, is, I don't know where you're at, unless we've spoken individually or on social media or I've worked with you. I don't know where you're at, but maybe you've got a full life makeover and overhaul that you want to do, like mine. Maybe it's just one or two areas, a relationship or a career. But the more evidence that you can stack that it's possible, the more possible it becomes. And that's, as I said at the start of the first podcast, that's the reason for me sharing this, really. And if it helps one person turn their life around, or if it gives one person the hope and optimism that they need, then that's what I want. So hopefully you can take something from this share. And, if you are in a bad place, I get it. I've been there. I hope, having listened to that, you can see the possibilities, but you can also potentially see some tools, some resources, and some ideas of what might be impacting that as well. That is all for my solo podcast episodes for now. Maybe there'll be some more in the future, but I hope you enjoyed it.